OpenAI 的 CEO Sam 奥特曼发布了红色代码，意在聚焦团队与谷歌进行决战。针对这一事件，全球最有影响力的财经科技播客 All-in 的四大元老齐聚一堂，进行了一场极为深刻而且火花四射的对话。这场讨论对于我们看清未来24个月 AI 领域的竞争格局、战略动向和可能的洗牌都极具启发性。我们一起来看。
A code red has been called by Sam Altman. He sent a memo on Monday, told employees to stop working on side quests, like ads, etc., and focus on the core, ChatGPT, the core experience, make it faster, make it better. And I think we all know why. Because Gemini and Grok and Claude from Anthropic have been crushing it. ChatGPT 5, let's call it what it is, was a bit of a flop. It didn't perform to expectations. We discussed that a couple of weeks ago or months ago. Anthropic is beating OpenAI in enterprise revenue starting this summer. And I talked about how, previous episodes on the streets, I'm seeing more startups want to use Anthropic's API and also Google Gemini's API, and they don't essentially trust OpenAI to not steal their business. So it's big changes right now. Here is a chart based on data from July. Most of Anthropic's revenue here is corporate. Most of OpenAI's, as everybody knows, is consumer. And here's another chart, OpenAI's new infrastructure deals versus revenue. And this is just for 2025 alone. A lot of deals being made, but competition is fierce. Chamath, your thoughts here on the game on the field? Code red, for people who don't know in our industry, is when everybody reports to the office and gets focused on one thing. And that's apparently what Sam's doing. How do you interpret it?
Look, I think that there are two things. Let's do the strategic lens and then the tactical lens. The strategic lens is that this is an incredibly vibrant and dynamic market. And I think it's too difficult and too early to pick winners other than at the silicon layer, where largely that die has been cast. I think that it's going to grow, so we can talk about how there'll be more competition, but it's roughly NVIDIA plus AMD plus Google plus a bunch of inference silicon. So that's sort of that market. But above it at the model market, it reminds me, frankly, a lot of when we were building Facebook. I remember sitting around our senior executive team, 6 of us, looking at MySpace, who was an order of magnitude bigger than us. And at some point, we were like, you know what? Our product is just fundamentally better than theirs. And they had 100 million plus users, and we had sort of 15. But we knew that we were eventually going to beat them. Nobody else knew. And I feel like this market is similarly evolving, which is that you have these early winners, but there's still so much work to do. There's still so many consumer expectations to define that it's too early to know who's going to win. And ultimately, what we are learning, especially as all these markets converge, is that distribution still matters a ton, which favors Google. It favors Meta, although Meta's quite behind. And now it will still favor OpenAI because they have 800 million monthly actives. So then the tactical thing is, what do you do, knowing that this dynamic is set up to have a lot of competition? And I think what you have to do is streamline the focus and try to make a crisis out of every opportunity. Because look, the companies tend to just grow. This positive entropy tends to cause people to hire at every level. And you look around and there's thousands of people that you didn't know even 6 months ago. And so I think if Sam can use different points in time to tighten the core focus, they'll be better off. And I think that is what Google did a while back. If you remember the whole Black George Washington thing, they were able to use that as a rallying cry to streamline the organization and to focus and to get their best and smartest people to work on the most highly leveraged tasks. And what you see now is an incredible overperformance from where they were. I've said this before, but Gemini is incredible. So I think that that's what's happening. Too early to call. It's a 3 or 4 horse race. And Sam needs to batten down the hatches. And I think he used this opportunity to stop a bunch of peripheral activities.
It's a very strong motivational tactic. It is a very focusing setting, and it drives innovation. And so we'll see what happens. ChatGPT was basically the market monopoly in AI or LLM chat interface, and it only had one way to go, which was down. Google, I think at this point, has roughly 14%. So here you can see OpenAI is on the decline. Obviously, a little over a year ago, they were at 90% plus market share in generative AI traffic. And today, Gemini is at 14, 15%. The depth, the flywheel that Google has built gives them such extraordinary advantage.
Okay, let's go to Emperor Palpatine. This is coming together as exactly as you orchestrated, you as the czar of AI and crypto. Thank you for your service, civil servant David Sachs. You wanted to see vibrant competition. Well, here we have it. Assess the playing field as you see it from DC.
Well, first of all, let me get...
Wanted to see vibrant competition. Well, here we have it. Assess the playing field as you see it from DC.
Well, first of all, let me give credit to Sam for calling this code red, breaking the glass and pulling the alarm.
首先，我们得明白这个红色代码在硅谷到底意味着什么。它不是一个比喻，而是一个实实在在的军事化管理术语被引入到了商业世界。当一家科技公司，特别是像 OpenAI 的这样明星公司宣布进入红色代码状态，那就意味着所有非核心的项目都要全部暂停，全员必须到岗，所有资源向一个最紧急、最核心的目标去倾斜。用查马斯的话说，这就是利用每一次机会制造危机，因为大公司天然会随着成功而膨胀，产生积极的熵增。人员越来越多，项目越来越杂，精力越来越分散，而红色代码呢，就像是一剂猛药，用来对抗这种组织的涣散和惰性。那么奥特曼为什么要在这个时候下这剂猛药呢？直接导火索清晰无比，竞争压力到达了临界点， ChatGPT 5市场的反响远低于预期，而被他们一度甩在身后的对手们正以惊人的速度追赶甚至反超。谷歌的 Gemini 尤其是最新的版本 3.0，凭借其深入融合搜索生态的天然分发优势，体验级飙升，正在快速的蚕食用户。Anthropic Cloud 在企业级市场异军突起，被许多开发者认为是最好的编程工具。它的企业营收据说已经从今年夏天开始超越 OpenAI。马斯克的 XAI 的 Grok 依托 X 平台的实时数据流，在回答当前事件和热点话题上独树一帜。而且马斯克在算力集群上的建设向来以疯狂的速度著称。甚至连 Meta 也依靠它庞大的社交网络，强制或者半强制的将 AI 搜索整合进了 Instagram 这些产品。尽管体验可能不完美，但巨大的用户基数本身就构成了威胁。OpenAI 在生成式 AI 流量中的一个市场份额已经从巅峰时期的超过 90%， 一路下滑到了 68% 左右，而这下滑的速度还在加快。对于一家习惯了定义市场、引领潮流的公司来说，这无异于敲响了最刺耳的警钟。红色代码就是山姆·奥特曼对这个警钟的回应，别再试图试探了，集中所有火力，把我们的核心产品 ChatGPT 变得更快、更好、更无可替代，打赢车厂与谷歌这些巨头的正面决战。
The ecosystem as a whole, it is very competitive. And I think we've got 5 major companies and they all have their strengths. So ChatGPT is the leader in consumer. They have something like 80% market share in consumer use of LLM chatbots. But then Google came out with their new Gemini 3, and they were starting to take share based on the strength of Gemini 3 and the integration it has, obviously, within Google search, because it's very easy for people to discover it when they do a Google search. And now they're seeing that it's actually pretty good. So they were starting to take share from ChatGPT, and I think that's why Sam issued the code red. Then you've got Anthropic, like you mentioned, where I don't particularly love what I've called the regulatory capture strategy, but I have to acknowledge their products are very good. Everybody seems to say that they have the best coding assistant, and they're carving out a very lucrative niche in enterprise. And then you've got XAI, which I think is the best at current events because of the integration with X. And also Elon seems to be able to scale his data center, his training cluster, the fastest. He's got, he had Colossus 1, now he's got Colossus 2, and that portends good things for Grok 5. It's going to be trained on the largest cluster of Blackwells. So in any event, you've got all these companies that are doing pretty well. I guess Meta has sort of hit some headwinds, but they're going to continue investing tremendously in AI, and they've got deep pockets to do it. So I think that they'll come back. And, what you see is all these companies are kind of leapfrogging each other. You get a new version, and then they sort of leapfrog each other in terms of benchmarks.
The leaderboards are showing that, yes, Sachs. When you look at the leaderboard, exactly. It's constantly Grok comes above Gemini, Gemini comes above Grok.
There's a lot of leapfrogging going on. There's a lot of, also I'd say, specialization now going on in the ways that I just mentioned. All these companies are developing strengths. There's sort of verticals happening.
Yes.
And so I've described this as sort of a Goldilocks scenario where you're making a lot of progress in AI, but the market is remaining very competitive. Ideally, it does not consolidate just to one monopoly player like we've seen in other tech markets, because then you end up with a big tech company that's got too much power and control. That's not generally a great thing for consumers.
What does it say about
us
versus China, Sachs? What does it say versus us versus China? That was the dialogue a year ago. Oh my God, China. Oh my God, China. Where are we at today? Because this is impressive, this vibrant competition.
Well, look, competition brings out the best in the American system. And I think that is what creates the most progress. And that's what's going to allow us to win the AI race against China. China has a lot of competition too, but they do tend to anoint national champions more. I guess they usually do it more after a competition stage. So, maybe it doesn't prevent competition. But look, China's formidable. They got a lot of good AI companies too, and this is going to be a horse race. But again, there's no question that the American system, for sure. But look, there's no question that in the American system, it's competition that brings out the best. And that's what we're seeing right now.
Jason, what do you think?
Interestingly, I just want to build a little bit on what Freeberg showed. The way I'm sort of seeing this is now ChatGPT versus the world. 36 months ago, ChatGPT, OpenAI had 100%, right? They started the category, as you pointed out correctly, David. And their decline in market share is increasing in velocity. If we were looking at just 12 months ago, they had 84% of the space, and now they're at 68. So this is accelerating. You pointed out, Chamath, correctly, why it's accelerating. Distribution matters. We talked about it countless times here. Meta is forcing you to use their AI search, which is pretty bad, I'll be honest. Every time you do a search on Instagram, it's annoying, but those all count as users using the product, just like Slack faced competition from Microsoft Teams when it bundled. And so I just tracked this out, and this is what I think is going to happen over the next 4 years. I think we're going to see OpenAI go down to about a third of the market, and I think the other players are going to take 2/3. The reason I think this is because, to Sax's point, specialization is happening. If you look at Nano Banana, which is the image processing over at Google, it's fantastic. Grok Image is fantastic. So you can have 5 different choices for images. You can have 4 or 5 different really credible choices. Now you have to look also at the competition and what Sam is facing. I've known Sam 20 years now. He is a consummate deal maker, perhaps too good at deal making. He was incredible at recruiting, and his PR game was very strong. Everybody realizes that, and look at who he's facing, Freeberg. Elon at Grok, Sergey and Sundar at Google, Zuckerberg at Meta, Dario at Anthropic, Satya at Microsoft, who's his partner, who's now his competitor. Elon was his benefactor, now his competitor. You got the open source projects, DeepSeek, et cetera, Sachs in China. And then his former employees are trying to kill him as well. So you have Ilya doing Safe Superintelligence, which hasn't launched yet, and Mira doing Thinking Machine. She's, obviously was doing all the video stuff. So I think what we're going to see here, if we're sitting here, I don't know, next year, they're going to be in the next 12 to 24 months under 50%. And these companies are explicitly trying to kill OpenAI. The amount of bad will that Sam has built is colossal. And I think it's from doing too many deals. And if you look at what he did to NVIDIA, NVIDIA put out a statement recently that they have the option to invest. So we were sitting here 2 months ago, and I know people in the industry were staying up late at night worrying about all these deals Sam was doing. All those deals apparently are coming out that they're options. These weren't real deals. A lot of them were options. And so Jensen came out and said, hey, we have the opportunity to invest in OpenAI. But you remember Sam did that AMD deal the week after or 2 weeks after he did the OpenAI deal. A lot of this is creating bad feelings. And I think we're at peak OpenAI right now. I said it on the show a couple of weeks ago. I think the pair trade is to bet against it's ChatGPT versus the world. And I think the world wins 2/3.
They can still be in a good place. I think you're right that this market probably gets split up 3 or 4 ways. And so the winner probably gets a third of the market. Most other markets that end up in a 3 or 4 person race ends up in that space. But a third of a market can still be very valuable if that market has 5 or 6 billion people using it.
Absolutely. It's going to be tremendous, yeah.
And that can still support a multi-trillion-dollar market cap. So I don't think it's by any means a death knell for OpenAI.
他们甚至大胆预测，按照这个趋势，未来12到24个月内 OpenAI 的市场份额可能会跌破 50%， 最终稳定在整个市场的1/3左右，而另外的2/3将被其他几个主要的玩家瓜分。这个判断的核心依据在于，市场正在从单一的工具向垂直化、场景化演变，用户不再忠诚于一个全能的模型，他们可能会用 Grok 来获取最新的时事和生成犀利有趣的图片，用 Cloud 来辅助写代码和进行深度逻辑的推理，用 Gemini 进行学术研究和复杂信息的整合，而用 ChatGPT 来进行日常的对话和创意写作。多栖使用正在成为高级用户的常态。每家公司的优势赛道开始分化， OpenAI 强在消费级的市场的先发品牌和用户习惯， Anthropic 强在企业级的服务的可靠性和专业性，谷歌强在无处不在的分发和生态的整合， XAI 呢强在实时性和独特的马斯克风格。这种分化使得任何一家都难以通吃所有的市场，但同时也意味着竞争将在多条战线上同时白热化。一个尤为值得深思的观察来自大卫·弗里伯格。OpenAI 作为曾经的颠覆者和挑战者，如今在心态上似乎正在变成守成的那个人，或者被挑战者。他尖锐地指出 ChatGPT 的产品体验正在变得过于礼貌和规避风险。有几个例子：不愿提供具体的数字，总是添加各种免责的声明，回答变得笼统而模糊。 这种出于对舆论监管和错误的恐惧而产生的自我受限，正在实质性的损害产品的实用价值和用户体验。而反过来呢，谷歌在经历了最初的混乱和保守之后，现在却展现出破釜沉舟的进攻姿态，产品迭代大胆而迅速，一进一退之间，攻守之势已经发生了改变。讨论中最精彩的部分之一就是复盘谷歌这场惊天逆转。
While we're speaking, Gemini just released Gemini 3 Deep Think is here. So the race is continuing even as we're taping the show.
Let me add one more thing, which is, I don't know, just a few months ago on this show, maybe it was 3 months ago, maybe it was 6 months ago, we were all like giving eulogies for Google.
I wasn't.
I was not either.
Well,
I took the other side.
I mean, I don't know. There are a lot of people were, and I was definitely
I think the majority of the industry was. I did take the other side of it. Yeah.
I think Brad Gerstner and Bill Gurley were.
Yeah, Brad Gurley, the Brad Gurley show.
Brad Gurley show.
It's one person.
Brad Gurley definitely were. And look, and the argument made a lot of sense, which is, even if you believe that Google's going to come back and have a credible AI product, remember, they were caught completely flat-footed by this. They figured out the transformer architecture back in 2017, but then they didn't really do anything with it. And then OpenAI grabbed onto that. And then, like you showed on that chart, they basically had a 2-year head start on LLMs. So a lot of people were basically saying that this was it for Google because obviously LLMs are so much better at web search than the 10 blue links. And moreover, for monetization, why would you need to have, ad links or paid links in an LLM world? And I think the point that Brad and Bill were making is, again, even if Google catches up, they'll never have the dominant position in AI that they have in search. It still might be true. Who knows? But the point is just everyone was saying that Google was in deep trouble 6 months ago. And then, like you said, I think Sergey came back and that gave them a major shot in the arm and they got more focused. And now they've launched what appears to be the best or one of the best models.
A competitive product.
But look, these other companies, there's a lot of leapfrogging going on.
I think really importantly, it's not just about Sergey coming back. It's about giving themselves permission to take risks. The reason Google didn't lead into AI for years, even though they had the technology stacks, is because they were nervous about cannibalization to search. They were nervous about the quality of the product. They didn't want to release things too early. And then they changed their posture and they became a more risk-taking posture. And that gave them the permission to run, which, by the way, I would argue is the opposite at OpenAI in the last couple of months. I used to use advanced voice on ChatGPT all the time. I cannot stand it anymore. I do not use it. It has basically hedged away all of the value because it tries to be polite. It tries to make sure that it's giving you warnings all the time. It doesn't want to give you data because it's scared that it might give you the wrong data. You can see it used to give you data all the time. I cannot get it to give me numbers anymore. I'm like, give me the numbers. And it just says these kind of high-level arching statements. And I'm like, that's not what I want. I went over to Gemini, it gave me the numbers. And I think that Google's willingness to take risk has really kind of highlighted the difference in posture in the last year. ChatGPT is now acting, and OpenAI has been acting like an incumbent, fearful of losing market share and fearful of getting attacked in the media and attacked by consumers for saying the wrong thing. And so they've taken this kind of defensive posture that I think has fundamentally damaged the product and the brand.
I'm just having a great time thinking about Freeberg yelling at his AI assistant in his car. It's like, we need to make a short out of that. Keep going.
Well, just Google did one other important thing. I mean, in addition to Sergey, there was putting Demis Hassabis in charge of all of AI. Because before, I think he was just in charge of Google DeepMind. It was sort of a subset. And then they put him in charge of the overall. And I think that made a huge difference as well.
Yeah. And the pie is growing. So the number of searches, the number of queries is increasing dramatically. I think we'll have 20, 30 times the amount of queries being done because the answers are better.
It's not just queries. It's not just queries. This is my point. It's like more than you're not using it to do search anymore, right? You're using it to watch video. You're using it to book flights.
Yeah, the agentic stuff. I'm putting that all together. So the amount of utility that you can get from it is so great that it's going to go 20x. The same thing's happening with ride sharing.
It's more than just search is the whole point. This has now become such an instrumental part of everything we do in our lives. And it's going to take over more of how we spend our time in our lives, that it's not just about search anymore. It's a whole new paradigm.
The pie will be 20 times bigger.
Let me ask you a question. Do you think that OpenAI's sort of more conservative risk posture, do you think it's a function of the fact that whether by luck or design, they decided that the consumer market was sort of their core market? Whereas you look at something like Anthropic, right? And they've carved out enterprise. But if you're a consumer product, there's so many more things you have to address. And you're going to be attacked in so many more different ways.
Yeah, and by being the market incumbent, it actually ended up creating a fantastic foil for Google because they started getting all of the arrows and slings from the media about health advice and suicides and hallucinations and sending wrong information and all the risks and damage that causes. Meanwhile, everyone's laughing and joking about Google and ignoring them.
It was more than that. Remember last summer, there was the court case where the judge said that they were guilty of having the monopoly, and then he was going to rule on what the remedies were going to be. And I think that was in, what was it, September? And the judge said that during the summer, and then whenever it was that he ruled on the remedy, that they were existentially threatened in their, whether to spin out.
Thing has ever happened to Alphabet than OpenAI's rise. And I think that rise, not only did it create the foil for Google in the monopoly sense, but it also took the attention away from Google, focused it on OpenAI. And that attention fundamentally damaged OpenAI's strategic product capabilities because they had to start to be so much more careful about what they said, how they said it, and it fundamentally damaged the product. And the opposite was happening at Google at the same time, which is Larry, Sergey, and Sundar being given permission by the board to take risk, to go hard, to figure this out. And boom, it's amazing how the horse race has changed.
还在半年多前，整个科技界在为谷歌唱衰，认为这家搜索的巨头正在 AI 的浪潮中反应迟缓，而且还有官僚主义，可能会像当年的诺基亚一样被颠覆。有观点认为，即使谷歌能追上来，它也永远无法在 AI 时代复制它在搜索领域的那种统治级地位。然而，谷歌的反弹力度超出了所有人的预期。关键的转折点在哪里呢？第一个，领导力和决心的重塑，谢尔盖·布林的回归被多次提及，这是一个强烈的信号，创始人的重新出山，不仅带来了技术的远见，更带来了不设限的勇气和背水一战的决心。同时，将德米斯这个 DeepMind 的创始人提升到统管整个谷歌 AI 业务的位置，确保了最顶尖的 AI 研究人才和最庞大的工程产品资源无缝对接。第二个是心态的根本转变，正如查马斯和 Sachs 分析的，谷歌最初最大的枷锁是怕蚕食自己搜索的业务，太赚钱了，怕被蚕食。他们其实拥有最好的技术，比如说这个 Transformer 架构，这个是人工智能的一个核心架构，本就是谷歌他们发明的，他们却不敢全力投入，怕损害搜索的体验和商业模式。是 OpenAI 成功和外部竞争的威胁，反而给了谷歌自我革命的许可证。当生存受到威胁的时候，所有的禁忌都被抛到脑后。第三个是完美的挡箭牌。David Sachs 提出了一个极为深刻的观点，就是当所有的这些媒体的聚光灯、监管的审查、社会的争议都集中在 OpenAI 这个新王身上的时候，谷歌得以在一个相对宽松和低调的环境中重新集结、调整战略、打磨产品。OpenAI 承受了所有第一个吃螃蟹的舆论和政治的风险，而当谷歌 Gemini 归来的时候，它反而成为了一个更稳定、更成熟的选择。第四就是无人能及的分发的飞轮。查马斯一再强调分销决定一切。谷歌拥有全球超过 90% 的搜索入口，数十亿的安卓设备、Gmail、YouTube 这些超级应用，将 Gemini 深度集成到这些产品中，意味着他们拥有几乎为零的用户获取成本和无与伦比的触达的能力。当用户进行谷歌搜索的时候，一个 Gemini 的对话框自然而然出现，这种便捷性是任何独立的 App 都无法比拟的。
But it does mean that a lot of these projects probably need to get shuttered because you need to just do a few things very, very well, because consumers will start to split their purchasing decisions, if you will, or their usage decisions across vertical things for specific purposes. So yes, I may use Grok Image because I love that and it's just much better, but then I may use Anthropic for code gen, while I use Gemini for deep research, and then I use ChatGPT for conversational search.
Yes.
Now all of a sudden I'm using all four. That's highly realistic, that outcome. In fact, I look at my phone now. I try to limit the number of apps on the phone, but I have Gemini and Grok as the two anchor apps because I'm so reliant on both of them, and I just keep going back and forth between them now.
Interestingly, I have four. I have Claude also and Perplexity on my desktop, and I go through all four of them. Here's what Google and other folks are planning. They're going to take the main revenue stream of OpenAI, and they're going to suck the oxygen out of the room, and they're going to try to strangle Sam and the team over there by making it free. So right now, if 75%
very violent metaphor.
But this is war. This is the greatest battle we've seen since like Netscape versus Microsoft and the internet. They're going to make Gemini free for life for the best models. That's my prediction for Google. And I think Meta will be right behind them. Why? They have the ad network already built. And they know in that fierce competition, which you were part of, Chamath and Freeberg, how fierce that competition was. That duopoly does not want to become a throuple with Sam. I think this is going to be very analogous to what happened with Netscape. People used to pay $50 for a Netscape browser. And then the idea when Microsoft came in and made it free, and Chrome became free, and Dolphin browser and a million other providers, same thing's going to happen to ChatGPT. Right now, 80% of the revenue comes from $20 subscriptions. That's going to get decimated to zero. I don't think consumers are going to pay for this product, just like they won't pay for search and they won't pay for a browser because Google and Meta will make it free.
I think it's different reason, actually. The reason why they will do it is because they have such an inordinate amount of cash, and that cash is valueless on the balance sheet. So you might as well just rip it in. If you look at the companies that have a need to spend money right now, it's Google, it's Microsoft, it's Meta, it's NVIDIA, and maybe Broadcom, but let's just keep Broadcom out of it. But
Apple is there
and
too.
Apple.
Yeah.
All of those companies have so much cash. If you actually look at the DCF of the enterprise value of these businesses, it gets very little credit for that cash, almost to the point where it's worthless. And so you either need to spend it on M&A, spend it on buybacks, or spend it to subsidize a product so that you can maintain your leadership in the broader market. And so what you're going to see is these big companies do this capital allocation model in a much more aggressive way. So there's only so many share buybacks that these guys can do. They approve 50, 60, 70, 80 billion dollars in buybacks. It just doesn't lift the stock price the same way it does when you actually show leadership in a product category.
Right.
So to your point, if you're just going to underwrite a decision, just look at the last 3 weeks of Google's stock performance. It basically doubled once we thought that Gemini was incredible. And so if you want to make Gemini even more incredible, just pour another billion users into it. And if that costs you 50 billion, it's okay because you'll make $1 trillion in market cap. It's like a no-brainer.
Yeah. And think about all the reinforcement learning that those big players have at scale. I think it's going to be just
By the way, the other thing is, if we're playing conspiracy theorists, I think the reason why Sam did those deals, to your point, he is a consummate, very talented deal maker.
Yes.
Is probably because he needed to continue to generate the type of momentum required to raise the quantum of capital that he needs. Yes. So if you're silent, it's much harder to raise $100 billion than you're shucking and jiving and you're just putting a lot of things out there. That could convince people that there's a level of momentum that's worth underwriting at a much higher valuation. So you have to keep that in mind too.
Yes, I think that is his high level, 4D chess. I think NVIDIA, just predicting it now, I think NVIDIA is not going to take their option to invest in OpenAI, or they're going to really downgrade it 70, 80%, and they're going to allocate it to other players. Freeberg, any final thoughts here as we wrap up on this?
What's your basis for that prediction?
I think that NVIDIA wants to own more of the other players. I do actually have a basis for this. I think that they were very pissed off at the other support he gave to their competitors after they had closed that deal. I know a lot of people in the industry.
You sound like the New York Times.
Well, great segue.
Everybody knows. What's your source?
Everybody knows. I don't want to reveal my sources say.
Sources say.
Open secret.
Sources say.
Sorry, I'll just, JK, let me just wrap up on the AI
Please,
stuff.
Yes, I was trying to give you that opportunity.
And I'll just echo a little bit what Chamath said. I don't think that the battle is going to be won and lost on LLMs. I think that there's several fronts, and we're so early in AI, it's not going to necessarily just be about text-based token production. These non-text-based models, the non-LLM models, the complexity to them and the differentiation is so much wider than it is in LLMs. Kind of think about it I think about it in terms of like a Hold'em versus Omaha game. Like the difference between the median and the best player in an Omaha game is so significant compared to the median and the best player in a Hold'em game, because it's just so much more complex. I don't know if you remember this guy, Chris Ferguson. He used to win every Omaha tournament back in the day because he was one of the first guys to figure it out. So everyone that knew Hold'em thought that they could just step into Omaha. And because he figured out how to do Omaha, he just wrecked everyone consistently. Anyway, in video, for example, right, they use diffusion models, and then they also use a transformer architecture, and then they use these convolutional neural networks to create structure within the frame and continue structure between frames in video. There are multiple models that have to interact and work together to render video. So you have to have good training. You also have to have unique architecture. And so the amount of differentiation that's possible in video AI is, I would say at this point today, so much wider than the differentiation in text-based AI, like what we see with LLMs. As those things start to become more mainstream, I think that applications that we are not necessarily thinking about today are going to become a bigger use case for how we spend our time. And that is really when you'll start to see, this horse race start to kind of play out a little bit more differently than it does today, where everything's all about usage on a chat interface. We're going to look back at that one day. It's going to be the equivalent of everyone on AOL Instant Messenger or Yahoo Instant Messenger. It's like, who gives a shit? That's not really where the game's going to be played.
那么未来24个月的竞争关键会聚焦在哪些维度呢？第一，竞争将超越文本聊天，进入多模态的智能体时代。大卫·弗利伯格的观点极具前瞻性，他认为目前围绕大语言模型的竞争就像是扑克游戏里面的德州扑克，虽然需要技巧，但规则相对简单，顶尖高手和一般好手之间的差距有限，但未来的竞争将更像是复杂的奥马哈扑克。 视频生成就是一个例子，它不再是单一的扩散模型，而是需要扩散模型、transformer、卷积神经网络这些多种架构协同工作，对时间顺序、结构、物理规律的理解要求极高。在视频生成这个领域，技术的差异化的空间会大得多。第二是 AI 智能体，另一个维度。未来的 AI 不仅是回答问题的聊天框，更是能执行任务的代理，帮你订机票、管理日程、分析投资组合、控制智能家居。这需要模型具有很强的推理、规划、工具使用和环境交互的能力。谁先在智能体 AI 代理这个赛道上取得突破，谁就可能开辟一个全新的、比聊天要大得多的市场。第二个维度是惨烈的资本消耗战和免费化的冲击，这是最残酷，也可能是决定生死的一环。Jason 和查马斯都指出，谷歌、Meta、微软这些巨头账面上坐拥着数千亿美元的资金。在资本市场来看，这些现金如果不用于再投资，它的价值就是不断的贬损的。因此，他们有着极强的动机，将这些冗余资本作为武器投入竞争。最可能的杀手锏就是免费。Jason 预测，谷歌可能宣布它最新的 Gemini 模型终身免费，这就像当年的微软用免费的 IE 浏览器打垮了收费的网景一样。谷歌和 Meta 拥有全球最强大的数字广告的网络，他们完全可以在 AI 交互中嵌入广告来变现，从而彻底扼杀20美元这个 OpenAI 这种 ChatGPT 20美元月费的生存模式。如果 OpenAI 的 80% 的收入还是来自于消费者的订阅，那么这一冲击将是毁灭性的。这场战争比拼的不仅是技术，更是资本的耐受能力。谁能够承受更长时间的巨额亏损，比如说在算力研发和用户的补贴上面都要亏非常多的钱，谁就更有可能笑到最后。从这个角度看，背靠着阿尔法、贝塔、微软和 Meta 的玩家，拥有 OpenAI 和 Anthropic 这些独立公司难以比拟的。他们还提到了一个微妙但关键的点：开发者社区的信任。一些初创公司开始对使用 OpenAI 的 API 心存疑虑。这些初创公司他们害怕 OpenAI， 因为它既是裁判又是球员，未来会与自己竞争或者掌握自己的核心数据。这种不信任感呢，正在将开发者推向 Anthropic 和谷歌的怀抱，构建一个可信、中立、繁荣的开发者生态。这将是平台长期竞争的一个重要组成部分。这场围绕红色代码的深度讨论，最终给我们留下了几个核心的启示。第一个就是速度和专注是生存之本。在这个以月为单位进行迭代的行业，任何的自满和分散是致命的。OpenAI 的红色代码是所有参与者的一个警钟，你必须永远保持初创公司那种敏捷和饥饿感。第二是心态决定姿态，是扮演挑战者呢，还是扮演守成者，将直接决定产品的攻击性和用户的体验。敢于承担合理的风险是创新不可或缺的一部分。第三，竞争是进步的一个终极引擎。正如萨克斯所言，他是在美国国会工作的这位。目前美国 AI 领域4-5个巨头激烈竞争，同时又有新玩家不断冒头，这样一种状态呢，是最理想的创新环境。这远比一家独大对消费者和社会都要更有利。激烈的竞争也是美国在与中国这些国家进行全球 AI 竞赛的时候保持领先的关键。第四，最终的赢家可能不止一个，市场可能不会出现唯一的胜者，而是形成一个多极格局。每家巨头都会有自己的基本盘和特色的优势，就像今天的云计算市场 AWS、Azure 和 GCP 并存一样。而对于客户而言，这无疑是最好的时代，我们将拥有多个顶级的选择，享受竞争带来的进步和低廉的价格，甚至是免费。听完整场讨论，我对弗里伯格说的那段话深有同感，这甚至直接解释了我个人的一个选择。作为一个使用了3年的 ChatGPT 的用户来讲，我是上个月 ChatGPT 5推出的那一个月，我还付了20美元，结果呢却深感失望。它变得像一个过于精明的官僚，回答问题总是打太极，话术非常圆滑，避免给出具体数字或者斩钉截铁的一个结论，包裹在层层的礼貌和免责声明里面。那种曾经让我觉得是在和一个聪明、直接、有用的伙伴对话的感觉消失了，取而代之的是一种隔阂感，还有效率的降低。我最终又回到了其他的几个工具，具体任务切换使用。所以当我听到红色代码这个说法的时候，第一反应是奥特曼这剂猛药可能来得太晚。这不像是一次先发制人的战略集结，更像是看到后台数据时的一个突然惊起而坐他们引以为傲、视为基本盘的消费端的用户， 和市场份额呢，都在以肉眼可见的松动和流失。那种因为成功而产生的不自觉的保守和防御心态，已经先于竞争对手的进攻，从内部侵蚀了产品的锋芒。此外，他们聊到了奥特曼是一个杰出的交易能手，这个观点如同一道光，照亮了我之前的一个模糊的观察。这绝对是点明了要害。OpenAI 史诗般的崛起之路，本身就是一系列高超的资本和谈判的结果。从早期得到马斯克的支持，到和微软的100亿级的联姻，再到后来与各国主权基金、产业巨头的复杂的交易，山姆·奥特曼这个人擅长的或许就是他在极度复杂的牌局中为 OpenAI 找到那个最优的交易结构，这就是他的超能力，非常强这方面能力，这是他的路径依赖。但是当这个竞争进入到拼刺刀的产品肉搏战和生态消耗战的时候，交易的技巧能否弥补你产品体验上的细微的瑕疵呢？过度精巧的交易设计是否会损耗合作伙伴的长期信任呢？这或许是他当下需要回答的新的命题。对于我们普通的用户而言，这场巨头战争无疑是福音，我们正站在一个黄金窗口期。为了争夺我们这些用户，谷歌可能会将最强大的模型免费，其他家也必须提供前所未有的优惠和更好的体验。作为消费者，我们乐见其成，坐享鹬蚌之争。而从投资者的视角，其实这场对话也揭示了一个极其关键的风险释放的信号。有一位嘉宾好像是指出，英伟达那广泛宣传的对 OpenAI 1000亿美元级的投资承诺，很可能最终只会兑现一小部分，20%左右。这件事非同小可，它意味着作为整个 AI 硬件的基石和风向标，英伟达正在有意识地降低和 OpenAI 的深度绑定，它不再把这个鸡蛋放在同一个篮子里面，而是更均匀地压注在了 xAI、Meta、Anthropic 这整个赛道。这实际上极大地分散了英伟达自身的风险。而英伟达的风险可控，某种程度上也就为整个美股 AI 板块的情绪和估值提供了一个不易察觉但至关重要的稳定的一个锚定点。因此 OpenAI 这个红色代码对我们而言远不只是一家公司的内部动员，它是一个强烈的市场信号，标志着 AI 的竞争进入到以用户真实体验为核心的中场战事，它是一个镜子。在这里也想听一听大家对于奥特曼这个人他的评价，欢迎在评论区留下真知灼见。更多内容抢先观看我广告视频，点击下方的链接加入频道会员。我们下期再见。